Just saw this headline from the Independent.ie. Dwindling attendance at Mass and pandemic have turned financial challenge into crisis for Catholic Church, by Sarah MacDonald. Catholic bishops, parish finance committees and parish priests growing concerned the prospect of parishes running out of money. It's behind a paywall, so I'm not going to pay for it to read it. Just go through the top headline there. Just want to discuss something. So we see what I experienced myself on Sunday at Mass in Athboy. The church was 30% full. This is the church I grew up in. You know, a church that would hold 400 people, at most 130 people or less. And it was obviously, the elder generations were there, the younger generations, my peers, my children's peers are completely absent. We saw this coming. I mean, what does the church expect will happen when you stop teaching the faith? What do you expect will happen when you stop reverencing the Eucharist? When you start handing the Eucharist out like a potato chip? When you become so woke that you outdo the wokeness that's going on in the world? I mean, all during this pandemic, bishops and priests, all during this pandemic, us, laity, were working in factories. We were, young people were socialising. Yes, it did happen. All during this pandemic, the Guinness factories were open, the potato factories were open, the porn industry was booming. All during this pandemic, all different industries continued on as normal. Yes, we continued on as normal with some, mass and maybe sanitary stuff, but we continued on this stuff. It was only the church that rendered itself non-essential in Ireland. The Catholic Church turned around and said to Catholics, look, what we've been doing here is non-essential. And I can understand for the first month, there's historical precedent why you would close churches. It has happened in the past. Bishops have closed churches during pandemics. Okay, 2.5 years later, after many people have had 1, 2, 3, 4 treatments, 2.5 years later, you're still harping on about, the sanitization and mask wearing, and no, we can't give you communion kneeling on the tongue, Robert. No, we can't do this. 2.5 years later, after 1, 2, 3, 4 treatments, we still can't get back to normal in our Catholic Church, and we've become irrelevant. You have designed yourself out of existence in Ireland because you have rendered the faith non-essential. This is what priests and bishops did. And many Catholics, like myself, have seen the two churches in Ireland, because traditional Catholics, we didn't change. We didn't destroy the Mass. We didn't close chapels. We continued. We lived the faith. We saw it. Priests stood with us. And many priests that wouldn't be traditional stood with us as well. There were many priests, I have to say, many priests, ordinary parish priests around Ireland, who continued saying the Mass every single week. That underground church flourished in Ireland and will be funded. I can assure you we will not be closing traditional chapels around Ireland. You've designed yourself out of existence, and now you wonder why people aren't coming back to Mass. Well, you've told them for 2.5 years it's non-essential. The Eucharist is non-essential. You've put it up there on the screen, and people log on if they were interested, and let's make a spiritual communion for those who can't come to Mass, blah blah blah. I tell you, it's very interesting to see what's happened to the Irish Church over the last 2.5 years. And I would ask priests now, where the path that you're on will not lead to renewal. You need to live the faith. You need to teach the faith. You need to stop the madness that's happened over the last 50 years, where people have stopped teaching the faith. You have to preach the faith. Talk to traditional communities. Traditional communities in Ireland did not implode during this pandemic. They grew. People saw the beauty of the Catholic faith, the traditional Catholic faith. People saw confession being offered before Mass. They went to confession. People travelled to Mass. And, it's not all doom and gloom. There is growth, there is beauty, but, you have to fight for the faith. You have to live the faith. You have to embody the faith. It's not just intellectual teaching the faith. It's our whole being. When you reverence the Eucharist, you get down in adoration. Get down on your two knees, put your head to the ground and reverence the Lord in the Eucharist. It's not just the words. It's not just words. It's our whole life, how we live the faith, how our soul, our being has been captured by the faith. So this is the challenge I'm giving Irish bishops and priests. I saw it in Knock last year. All the bishops in Ireland met to celebrate that Mass to remember the dead during the pandemic, and not one bishop or priest in Knock could dirty their hands to give out the body of Christ to the faithful. Not one of you would stand up. The video is there. It's not a criticism. It's a reality. You don't believe. You don't believe. You're not willing to give your lives to the faith. You're afraid. You are afraid. Priests and bishops were afraid. I don't know what you're afraid of, because if you actually did believe, you would not be afraid. You would be the apostles that Christ has called you to be, but you're afraid. And people will not follow people who are afraid. Afraid to stand for the faith. Afraid to keep your churches opened when they never needed to close after, that second lockdown. We didn't need this. And yet you were afraid. You're afraid. People see it. It's become irrelevant. Nobody cares about the Catholic faith that is not lived with passion. How can you capture somebody's attention to show them the beauty of Catholicism when you close churches and you're afraid and you become so woke? And so, it's laughable to see what's going on. It's laughable to see after 2.5 years. This year we'll turn the Cathedral of Christ the King, which was the first cathedral dedicated to Christ the King in the world. Now this is really, really, really important that people understand. The Cathedral of Christ the King was the first cathedral in Ireland in the world dedicated to Christ the King when that was made a feast. We're going to turn Christ the King's Cathedral into a Cayley Hall, where we'll have a Cayley competition, an entertainment competition in Mullingar. Think about, this will be the turning point in Catholicism in Ireland, when we have dethroned, we will literally dethrone Christ from that cathedral and turn it into an entertainment hall. Nothing good will come with this. I guarantee you, nothing good. Mark my words, remember this video. Nothing good will come from turning that cathedral into a Cayley Hall in Ireland. But this is silly season in the Catholic Church, and we're scratching our head how we can get people back. You haven't educated them for 50 years. I wasn't educated in the faith. I went to Catholic school, and we were given these new programs and these new catechesis. It's all feeling. It's all gets the guitars out 1970s and all this. It's all this. We weren't taught. The next generation in the 90s wasn't taught. The last 30 years, Catholics weren't. And you're wondering why people won't go to church. You haven't engaged their heart. Their heart isn't in the faith. They don't understand it because you haven't preached it. Anyway, just my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments. Share and like this video if you are passionate about the faith and you want to see it renewed and passed on to the next generation. Anyway, God bless. Take care. Goodbye.